your hands. And having people come in, even that weren't students, they'd stand there and shut their eyes, and I wouldn't tell them what I was going to do. I'd just say, just stand there and close your eyes and tell me what you feel. And I'd shake my arms out like this, and I'd put that energy, that chi, into my hands. And the greater that energy got, the bigger the ball you could form. When you start, you feel it like this, and then it grows. I got my hands like this, and I could take my hands and just go to the side of their head, and it would push them back, even off of their feet. Back about 2 years ago, some of the students that I had would be from here to the wall, and they'd shut their eyes, and I could push them with my hand. Or if they'd reach for me or start walking towards me, I could hold my hand up and stop them. These are things that we see in the movies. I mean, how many of y'all have seen Star Wars? Okay, I watched it. I know I probably shouldn't have, but those are the things that you see in the films. And people say, well, it's make-believe. It's not real. It is real. That's why they put it in the movies, is to make us think about those things and make us long for that kind of power. When it got to the point that I was doing that to people, it didn't matter. Fighting, you don't have to fight anybody. Somebody would, reach for you and you'd block them, and it would hurt them so much from you putting your arm up to block it that they didn't want to fight anymore. We used to do a type of training at the school. It was called pain class. And the first session that you would do with pain class with usually a green belt or a brown belt, you would have two partners face each other, and my partner over here, he'd hit me on the shoulder, so I'd hit him back on the shoulder, and he'd say harder, and I'd hit him harder, and he'd hit me harder, and we'd go back and forth until one of us said quit. Now, if you get two guys that are pumped full of testosterone, which one of them is going to say stop? I mean, neither one of them do. You keep pushing yourself to go farther. And then we'd go to the face. You'd start smacking the face. So I'd smack him on the face, and he'd smack me on the face. And it would start off, like that. But after a few moments, we would be smacking each other with an open palm as hard as we could. And you build up this quote-unquote energy so you don't feel it. After you got to that point, then we began using boards. And we would start with half-inch oak or hickory boards. And you'd take one about 4 feet long, and you'd strike each other in the arms, you'd strike each other on the thighs, and you'd strike each other in the stomach. And it's training your mind to control your body. At least that's what they tell us. After you graduated past that, we started using 2x4s and boat oars. And we got to the point where you could shatter a 2x4. Somebody'd swing the 2x4 at you, and you put your arm up, and it would break the 2x4. And it wouldn't even leave a bruise on your body. Now, I'm telling you, after 25 years of doing this, that's impossible physically. Spiritually, when I say spiritually, I mean through the occult, it's very possible. But that's not physically possible unless you have either divine intervention, Yahweh, God is on your side, or unless you have Lucifer on your side. So he began to teach me how to use this power. This is a picture of what they call the chakras, the energy centers in the body. I asked him, after a few years of training under him, I finally got the guts up to ask him about why he had all these pictures of the Hindu gods and the Hindu warriors instead of the Chinese. And he told me, he said, Eric, he said, where did the Chinese get Kung Fu from? I said, the Shaolin Temple. He said, but where did the Shaolin Temple get it from? I said, a man named Damo or Bodhidharma. Well, Bodhidharma was Indian. He was Hindu. And he was the one that brought this idea of energy to China. Now, when he did that, he talked about these 7 energy centers in the body. One was on the crown, one was here. That's really important to remember for what we're going to talk about tomorrow. This is called the third eye. How many of y'all have ever seen like a picture or a drawing of a cyclops? Y'all remember that? They had one eye. It was right in the middle. The Bible says this is where the seal of the Almighty goes. In here, to the Chinese and to the Hindu, to the Indian people, this is the most powerful place in the human body. This is where all that energy, that chi or that spiritual energy comes from, is here. And he told me, he said, the Indian people, the Hindus, they believe that we have something down here in our belly, approximately 2 or 3 inches below the navel, that gives us power. And that power, that energy, is called the Kundalini or the serpent force. And the whole goal in martial arts is to make that serpent, instead of living down here below your navel, travel up your spine and live here between your eyes. Now, when he told me that, I knew something was not right about that. Because we are told from Mrs. White that everything down here is called base passions. Hunger, food, self-defense, anger, rage, all of that comes from down here. Why would I want the serpent, who the Bible says Jesus Christ is going to crush his head, why would I want to let him come up here and live in my mind? But that's what the goal was. So they taught about these different energy centers on the body and how to move energy or chi from down here up through the body. Now, one thing that I would like to really warn you guys about, yoga. When I was first introduced to yoga, you think, well, it's good for stretching, it's good for health, it's good for breathing. Look up what the word yoga means. The word yoga in Indian language or in Hinduism means yoking. It means to yoke, to join the man or the practitioner, the woman, with Brahma, which is the Hindu god. So when you say yoga, you are talking about the joining of a god, a false god, with the human practitioner. And that's where they get the same energy from. They say by joining him, by receiving this god or this demon spirit, you are given power. This symbol right here, do we have anybody that reads Chinese?
The last two is red dragon. The first one is, I think it's, yeah.
Great. A great red dragon. How many of you guys have been to a Chinese restaurant? How many dragons do you see in a Chinese restaurant? Okay, martial arts schools. How many dragons do you see? Everywhere. The reason why is the dragon is the symbol of power. It is the symbol of power in the Chinese and in the Japanese mind and in the Hindu mind. That dragon, that's where the power comes from. When I began training in martial arts, especially in Kung Fu, the reason I liked them is they did something called animal boxing. That means you act like an animal, which is kind of weird because God says we're above the animals. Why would I want to? That's kind of like being in college and somebody saying act like a 3-year-old. Why would you do that? You know? We were made so much higher than the animals, but yet the Shaolin monks and the Kung Fu teachers train people how to become like that animal. Usually the first animal that somebody picks is something that resembles their personality or their build. So it's kind of fun. People get excited about it and they say, well, I look like a white crane because I'm skinny and slender, or maybe I'm like a snake, or maybe I'm more like a tiger, or maybe if I'm a big husky guy, I'm like a bear. So they personalize what that instructor is telling them, and they begin to imitate that when they spar. The problem is, though, is as you go through those animals, learning how to mimic them, the greatest goal that the Kung Fu teachers tell you is don't just imitate the animal, become the animal. And when you would see people, there were people in the last 10 years that I trained with, and you could watch somebody that was a green belt that maybe had 3 or 4 years experience, and they'd get out there and they'd move like an eagle, or they would act like a tiger. But then you'd see somebody that had done it for 10 years, and when you looked in their eyes, they were that animal. There was something else that had possessed their eyes and their mind. You could look into the eyes. There was one man that I trained. His name was, well, I'm not going to worry about names since this is on film. But he had done Cobra style for about 12 years. And you could get out there. I could put somebody out there with him, and you look in his eyes, and you were looking into the eyes of a snake. He was not there at all. And they could go in and out of it in a second. The bad thing is usually that spirit or that animal would get there when they got hit. You'd be out there sparring and pretending, punching and kicking, having fun, and then all of a sudden, smack, right on the face, and you'd see the change in their eyes instantly. You could see it in a flash. It's the same way in a fight. You can see God's spirit and the devil's spirit. You've got a nice, gentleman at a restaurant or something, and somebody comes up and bumps his car or says something to him, and you'll see the eyes change instantly.